Okay, hello everyone. The clock has officially struck noon here in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where I am. So good afternoon, but we know also good evening, morning, or middle of the night, depending on where folks are tuning in from across the world. And welcome to this edition of PON Live from the Program on Negotiation at Harvard Law School. My name is Nicole Bryant. I'm the managing director here at the Program on Negotiation. And we are very delighted to be gathered here today for a book talk in celebration of Professor Leslie John's new book, Revealing the Underrated Power of Oversharing. And I'm going to get to introduce the book and our speaker in just a moment. But first, let me just say a warm welcome to everybody. If this is your first event with PON Live, we are very happy to have you. The program on negotiation has for over 40 years now led the world in research and curriculum development and executive trainings on the topics of negotiation, mediation, and conflict resolution. And we're really delighted to put together a whole bunch of free webinars and informative talks for our community, such as this one. So please check out everything that we have on our website, tons of resources, and including two very recent events that we had last week. Professor Julia Minson's book talk on how to disagree better, and a conversation with Malala Yousafzai, who was here for an in-person event at Harvard Law School, but we weren't able to live stream that, but we do have the recording for people who would like to watch it. So I would like to start as ever by thanking all of the wonderful members of the PON events team, and specifically CJ Bixby and Luis Reyes for all of their work behind the scenes, getting this and all of our events up and running. For today's event, we will be together for about an hour, and Professor Leslie John will be able to present her work for, more or less 40 minutes, and then we will have time for questions and answers from the audience. So if you have a question at any point during this chat, please go ahead and put it in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. And if you need to jump off at any moment, or you'd like to rewatch again or share with a friend, the recording of this event will be up on our website in just a few days, so you can go check it out and continue or share widely. All right, I think I've done all of the housekeeping notes, so it is my absolute pleasure to introduce now Professor Leslie John, the James E. Burke Professor of Business Administration at Harvard Business School, who is here to talk about a really, really fascinating subject that I'm sure will speak to many of us. If you, like me, went to a party on Sunday night, started talking about something from your past, wondered if that was interesting to anyone or if that much detail needed to happen, you may be really interested in the research that's in here. And I will say one of the incredible things about this book is that Leslie is leading by example throughout it. She's revealing things about herself. So you will feel at the end of these couple hundred pages that you know Leslie John in the way that I now feel that I know her much more than at, collegial academic events, and learn all about her past, some of her high and low moments of her life. And really, thank you, Leslie, for writing this book. I found it really, really enjoyable and informative. And I know that we're going to have a great discussion today. So thanks for being with us. And I will now cede the Zoom floor to you.
Amazing. Thank you so much for having me. I am going to share my slides. Um, yeah, thank you for that beautiful introduction and for hosting. This book ended up being surprisingly more personal than I thought it would be. Maybe every author ever says that. I don't know. But so I've studied how people make decisions about what to share and what not to share. I'll just stop that share while I do this little intro so we can see each other. I've studied what to share, what to not share, what to say, what not to say for a long time now, almost 20 years. And, the first half of my career, I spent largely on working on the questions of social media and online sharing and why do people open their hearts out online and then they their employer, they're venting about their boss and then their boss sees them and they get fired. It seemed like a place for folly where people were making all kinds of errors on decisions of what to share and what not to share. But then over the course of the years, as I was studying this, and literally I was lecturing people on how much we suck at privacy and we make the wrong decisions online and we overshare all the time. As I was doing this in my personal life, I was filling out BuzzFeed quizzes. Those are my kryptonite. I may have had all of my passwords on a text pad on my computer. So I was living this double life. And it made me reflect a lot. And as I reflected on my research and the things that had happened in my life, I realized that actually the number one thing that I had learned was that when I make people feel safe, when I make them comfortable, when I make it fun, when I make it relational, people are really, really happy and wanting to reveal. And so then I became obsessed, not with the question of what's TMI, but actually the question of what's TLI, what's too little information. I came from we overshare too much to are we sharing enough? So that's kind of the background. Um, and I want to share with you some of the ideas that are peppered through the book, so you can see the basic thrust, which is we have so much to gain by being even just a little more open. Yes, there is such a thing as oversharing still, but I think it's something that we treat it as the greatest social sin. And I think that's really a spectacular misdiagnosis. So let me show you the money. I got to show you some data to back up all these points, right? Okay, here we go. So, um, when we think about the question of whether to conceal something or whether to reveal something, we kind of often our default is this model in the sense that if we conceal, if we don't say the thing, if we stay mum, we feel very safe. We feel like that's the conservative thing. And then as we think about saying the thing, like telling our colleagues that we feel frustrated about them or telling our spouse that we're annoyed when they leave the toilet paper or the toilet seat up, whatever it is, we feel like this is TMI to share a lot. So we get more nervous. And so we default to concealing. Default is an important word here. We default. We almost, well, without thinking, we don't share oftentimes. So the next phase, though, I've realized over the years that this is way too simple. This is not reality. This is how we act, but this is not reality. If we do this, we miss out on a lot of good things in life. So the reality is more complex. It looks more like this, where yes, there is such a thing as too much information, but there's also this issue of too little information. We can err both by sharing too much and also by sharing too little. Um, like there is still TMI, okay? Just to validate the naysayers being like, there is still TMI. Of course, I'm not saying we should always share our deepest and darkest secrets. Here's an example, one of many we might see. Facebook, someone is venting about her boss, forgets that her boss is on Facebook. The boss proceeds to fire her based on what she posted, this insult about him on Facebook. So there are very real consequences to oversharing. And this is a mistake sometimes, as it is here. However, um, we're really too obsessed with the supposed safety of concealment. It's not a safe spot. In fact, it has many risks, just as revealing has many risks. And the more I've studied this, and the more I've come to believe that actually it's like this, the reality, right? Like the optimal spot, I think, is actually tilted to be the default should be like a little bit more open than we normally are. Okay, now how did I get to this? Well, there were three findings in particular that rocked my world. That really made me go from like, we overshare to are we sharing enough? Okay, so the first one was a thought experiment. So let me take you on this journey. If you were in this study, what I would do is I would ask you which of two people you would rather date. And I'm going to ask you who you'd rather date, who you like better. Now, I'm to make this decision, I'm going to show you how these prospective dates had ostensibly answered a series of different questions. So you're going to see their answers on the questionnaire, and then you're going to use that to make your choice. Now, warning, these are a little bit racy questions. So, this question, apparently, the person on the left, prospect number one, says frequently. Like it can't get worse than that. That's pretty bad. This person says choose not to answer. I agree, neither of these is your number one choice, but if you had to choose, who would you choose? That's the thing that shocked me. Again and again, we find that people tend to prefer the revealer, the person who admits to like very bad things over someone who conspicuously withholds. 64% in this case. We've tried it with lots of different questions like this. Again, you're like, sign me up. Person who tries to gain access frequently, the worst that they could be on this response scale, right? Filing a false insurance claim. Yep. Prefer that to the hider. Ooh, yep, sign me up. So you can see, like, this really surprised me. And we did these many, many times, these studies across many contexts. So, dating context, another context is hiring. People would rather hire a candidate who admits that they got bad grades in college relative to someone who says, I'm not answering that question, who like very conspicuously withhold. So that was a revelation, and it made me appreciate wow, sometimes it's really better to reveal even bad things relative to withholding. Um, and then the question was why? Why do we see this? Why are people weirdly choosing kind of the devil they know relative to someone who just says no? And there's lots of reasons why the person who would say no, I choose why someone might refuse to answer, right? They might be like, this is an unacceptable question. It could be like a principled withholding, but nonetheless, we don't like these people. Why don't we like these people? We don't like them because they're shutting us down from something that is deeply important to really human flourishing. That is building connections, building trust, building community, right? We are herd animals and we thrive. We not only thrive, we require connection with others. And it turns out that self-disclosure, saying sensitive things, sharing sensitive personal information is the cornerstone of building relationships because it shows that we trust the person, right? When I share something sensitive with you, I'm implicitly saying, I trust you, because otherwise I wouldn't be sharing it with you. I trust you not to make a fool out of me. And when I show that I trust you by taking that social risk, how do you respond? Well, you like me. You feel like you trust me. And that's the spark, right? So it's trust is this core underlying thing that social risk shows that you trust the person, which in turn increases liking. And as I said, we've shown this in other situations as well. This is the situation with resumes. When people admit to their bad grades, people would rather hire those than those who say, nope, not doing this. I abstain from this fundamentally important activity that the herd engages in, right? That's very off putting. Okay, now the second finding is brain scans, and I'm saying this in a cheeky way because it's real science. Because us social scientists, we often get, oh, that's fluffy, that's so fluffy feelings and thinking and psychology. Well, obviously, I disagree, but some of you may be more compelled by the hard science of this, the brain scans. You're like, what does the brain look like? Well, in one set of studies, my colleagues scanned people's brains as they were in an fMRI machine. So, an fMRI machine, of course, tells us what areas of the brain are most activated as a function of whatever tasks the experimenters give the people to do. And so, what they did in the study is they put people in the scanner and half of them got to self-disclose. So half of them, the researchers asked them personal questions like, what's your favorite ice cream flavor? You know, like fun questions about one's personal, preferences. And the other half of people just answered like trivia questions that had nothing to do with them. And what they found was that the people who got to self-disclose, the pleasure centers of their brain lit up, as in the pleasure centers of their brain were active. And so that's a huge revelation, I think, because no pun intended, because nature has a way of making things that are good for us pleasurable. It's the same areas that are activated when we have sex. So it suggests that self-disclosure may be intrinsically really, really good for us and important. The third finding that rocked my world was preschoolers. So I'm a boy mom. I have a 4-year-old and a 5-year-old. And when I encountered this study, my children were of this age. So I encountered it a couple years ago, and it was with like 2 and 3, 4-year-olds. And what they did was they videotaped the faces of these children as the children watched a scary movie because they wanted to see how much expression did children naturally let out on their faces? Were they really expressive, or did they kind of suppress expression of any feeling? The researchers also measured something called the galvanic skin response. And what that is it's a measure of how sweaty our hands are, which is a measure of physiological stress, right? So, how objectively anxious or stressed we feel, it leaks out by sweaty hands. And so, what they found was the more children let it out, the more expressive their faces were, the less sweaty their palms were. Okay, so the more they expressed, the less physiologically stressed they were. Put differently, the ones that held it in, they were more stressed. Then the kicker, I mentioned I'm a boy mom. The kicker, by the time the children got to kindergarten, so just a couple years later, there were now gender differences such that the boys were holding back and the girls were more likely to be expressive, right? Suggesting that the boys, it's not good for the boys because they're more stressed, because we know that we get stressed when we hold things in. So that really made me like, that's the clincher on, oh, undersharing is a huge problem. How can we do it better? How can we stop undersharing? And yet, it's hard to share though. Even when I know cognitively it's so good for us to open up even a little bit more, I have a hard time doing this too. In fact, when I was writing this book, which I hope you'll buy. I think you'll find it fun, even if it's at my expense, because I realize my brand of oversharing is funny, self-deprecating stories about myself. But it's not just gratuitous, the reason why I have these stories in there, because so many of them I looked back on and I thought, yeah, this was cringy in the moment, but what about the long game? And for the times I didn't share, I thought, would it have been so bad if I had just shared? In fact, it wasn't until I wrote this book that I really started engaging with the content, engaging with the findings, as in, it's one thing to like know your research and know what the effects are, but it's another to actually internalize them and do the science. And it wasn't until I was writing the book that I actually started doing the science and practicing. And that's when I really, truly internalized and started believing the science, because I'm like, oh my gosh, this is actually true. This actually works. All these tools of helping us to open up more. Okay, so why do I have steak tartare on this beautiful giant screen here? Why? Where is she going with this? Well, when I was a baby academic, I was invited over to Berkeley to give a talk, which, especially when you're a junior, any talk is an unofficial job talk. So I was on my best behavior, trying to impress. And two superstar, they're married professors in the department, invited me over for their house to the house for dinner. And I was so delighted and nervous and excited. I walk through the Berkeley Hills, I get to their house, and they say, Leslie, we're so excited. We went to the market today and we got this like beautiful cut of meat. I'm sure they didn't say meat, they said something more elegant. And so we're having steak tartare. And my heart sank because I do not like steak tartare. And yes, I've tried it. It's just not my jam. I just don't like it. I wish I liked it because I feel like I should like highfalutin things, especially in that moment. And so instead of me saying, I like it, I want it, instead of me like saying it's not my favorite thing, I of course hid it because I felt shame and I wanted to impress them. Now, in the moments like these, I want to turn to Mr. Bean. So, so there is this episode, I love Mr. Bean, where he's at a restaurant and he orders steak tartare. He doesn't know that that means raw flesh. And let me start, it's going to start over again. Okay. And so he's hiding the things, right? So he's like, what do I do? So the waiter comes, he's like, oh, this is great. This is great. And then the horror. And then he proceeds to the rest of the sketch. He tries to hide it everywhere, like in this purse behind him. And I wanted to do that with my soul. I want to do that. Of course, I couldn't do that. So instead, I just pretended that I liked it, suppressed my gag reflex, and ate it. But in hindsight, I worried, would it have been so bad if I had just said, I'd prefer a salad or something? I don't know. Like, and it's understandable that I didn't speak up, but I did wonder, like, would it have been so bad? And in fact, maybe we would have shared a laugh over it. Maybe we would have bonded and connected. It certainly would have been memorable. But why don't we speak up? Or why don't we share when we should share or we could share? I think there's two related problems. Problem one is a really, really core and fundamental problem. And that is, oh, good, I've got my golf balls here. That is the problem. I'm going to do a little demo for you here. That is the problem of not even realizing the opportunities to share as they present themselves. So, to show this, so it often does not even occur to us the thought of sharing more. So that we understand this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a tiny exercise. This is a jar, and these are tennis balls or ping pong balls. And I'm going to quickly take you through a day in the life, a boring day in the life of Leslie John. And I am going to, every time I think something but don't say it, I'm going to put this in here. Okay. So I wake up in the morning, I roll over in bed. Good morning, Collie, as I say. What I don't say is, I slept like crap. When I sleep like crap, I have a hard time regulating my emotions. I don't say any of that. In fact, I don't even, the thought doesn't even occur to me to say it. Then we get to the bathroom, standing in front of the mirror, look at myself. I think, geez, I feel older than I thought I would at this age. And I'm in my mid 40s. Why do I still have acne? Ugh, I feel terrible. I don't say any of that. I just ruminate alone. Then we go down to the kitchen. The kids are frolicking. Colin, he says, "What do you want think the kids want for breakfast, for snack at lunch?" I say, "I don't know. I can't make another decision." That's what I say. But what I don't say is, because I'm sleep deprived, I need you to make more decisions. I can't make any decisions. Um, then I get to work. My assistant says, "Hi, great. How are you doing?" I say, "Great." What I don't say is, "I feel like crap. I have a big meeting. I'm really nervous about it." Get into the office. My work bestie comes by. She's like, "What do you got going on today?" I say, "I got a big presentation." What I don't say is, "I feel nervous. Maybe we could practice together." Right? So we're not even halfway through the day, and we have accumulated a lot of things that went unsaid. Now, my point is not, it's not that we should say all of these things, right? You don't want that. I don't want that. My assistant, I don't want to dump to my assistant. Like, I think it's often the kind thing to do is to hold back, right? It can be kind to suppress, to censor yourself. I don't want to burden my assistant, especially with a status hierarchy. So the point isn't that everything here should be shared, but rather we should consider sharing these things. We should consider every one of them. That's the problem. These things, we default to silence. That's what I mean when I say we default to silence. We don't even think about the possibility of sharing. We don't even see these as decisions. But in fact, when we default to silence, that is a decision, albeit made automatically and implicitly. And so the goal here of these balls is to surface the submerged state and bring awareness to how often, just how many opportunities we have to share more, to think about them. And you can, and I would say though, most of these things I should have shared. So, right, I should have told my husband that I didn't sleep well and that I'm a little bit unhinged because of that, because he knows that he's kind and he can't read my mind. But when I tell him this, he's like, okay, LJ needs kid gloves. In the bathroom, the scene in the bathroom, if I had shared kind of how I was feeling about my body, he would have said something super nice. Maybe we would have gotten a chuckle out of it, you know? At least I would have felt understood and known for who I really am. And that's the core to intimacy, right? When you feel like your partner knows and loves you for exactly who you are, not some idealized version. He loves you or she loves you, warts and all. Okay. So that's the first issue. The second issue. Okay, so good, that's done. Check it off the list. But the way you can do this, like I do this regularly, I'll do these, I call them disclosure audits of my day, where I'll kind of have a notepad and I'll track it throughout the day, and then you reflect. And then you can experiment and try saying the things, see what happens. The second problem is that when these do rise to our consciousness, we don't make disclosure decisions in an even-handed way at all. In fact, when I tell people, when I say, ask people to consider something that they may disclose, like, do you tell your boss you have ADHD? That's a real dilemma because on the one hand, you might get accommodation, but on the other, you could face discrimination. So real quandaries there. Do you tell your partner about that old fling? Do you tell your kids about your partying ways when you were younger? All of these things have trade-offs. And so when I ask people to consider something like this, the number one thing they say, risks of revealing. Like, do you tell you came up with an idea at work and it was your idea and yours only, but it took a group of people, your team, to bring it to fruition. You overhear your teammate, the boss asks your teammate, whose idea was this? They say, oh, it was a group effort. And a part of you dies inside because you love your team, but you also like ideas matter and credit matters. The old Leslie would never have said anything. The thought of saying something would not have even occurred to me. Now, when I ask people to think this through, we can all relate to this. They say the risks of revealing immediately come to mind. They say, I'm going to be seen as petty. It will wreck my relationship with this person that I really like, and so on. And those are valid, but we usually stop there. And my job is to ask you to go further and to say, okay, those are fair. What about the risks of not revealing, the risks of keeping mum? And when you think about it with that lens, you start thinking, okay, well, I can speak for myself. If I may continue to ruminate about it. And then when I ruminate, I kind of, it could seep out into passive aggression. And then that could distance my relationship from the person. So that could have relational harms too. And then you start thinking, well, if there's a way I could say this, if there's a way I could have this conversation with the person, and there is, that's a whole other book maybe is like, which others have written, is how to have difficult conversations, how to broach things in a way such that you won't get pushback. Julia Minson's book is a great book for that, how to say hard things essentially. But if you figure out how to say it, then you start to think, wow, if I figure out how to say it, then my colleague will know me better. They will know who I am, which will increase our connection because, again, feeling known for who you are is super important. They might respect me more because I had the confidence and assertiveness to say this thing, because ideas do matter. And so you can see, and this might be great for our relationship in the long term, right? We might become closer. So you can start to see that we have too narrow of a view, and really to make a good, well-reasoned decision, we need to think about not just the risks of revealing, but also the benefits of revealing. I have this on a different slide, but also the benefits of revealing and the risks of not revealing and the benefits of not revealing. We need to think about all four things. Now, to help this, help us along here in appreciating this, because it really is hard when we are faced with decisions of what to reveal or not. We tend to freak out. Technical term there. We freak out about the risks. As I said, the number one thing we do is we think about the risk. Why do we freak out about the risk? Well, for lots of reasons, including when we TMI it, I just verbed that, when we step over the line a little bit, we immediately see the disdain, the shock, the horror, the cringe on people's faces. And we're acutely sensitive, exquisitely sensitive to social reactions. And that's really negative, feeling socially excluded like that. But what we often don't appreciate is that someone can cringe, but they can also respect you and admire you for it. They can respect you but and admire you, but that often doesn't register on their faces. You just see the cringe, but you don't see that like also they respect your guts, and the next time they need someone to confide in, they're going to come to you. So you don't kind of see the upside immediately often. So we freak out about the risks of revealing. Okay. Um, we dread the sting of a disclosure hangover, right? That feeling of like, oh, what did I do? What did I say? It's like I just poured gasoline all over my body and lit a match. Like that's, you can tell that I felt this many times. Okay. But even then, there's often redemption. Okay. So when I was a baby academic, I actually, this is, you'll notice, this is Harvard, this is Copley Square. And I had my interview here. Um, for my first academic job, it was at a conference, and all of the different universities come and you go around to the different rooms and I know it's kind of shady sounding because I think they still do it this way. This is not a Me Too story though, thank goodness. Anyways, you go around to the rooms and you pitch yourself. Each room has different set of professors from a different university in it. So there's a little Leslie Nerdly. And what I did was I get into the suite. This one was a beautiful giant suite. So it was a fancy university. So felt high stakes. I was super nervous. And now when I'm nervous, I tend to, one of my quirks or ticks is that sometimes I blurt out stupid things. Um, and what I did in this case was I sat down, and one of the august professors, he could tell that I was nervous, and he looked at my resume, which I am a professionally trained ballet dancer. So in a past life, I did ballet. He sees this and he's trying to make conversation, like a laudable attempt. And he says, "Oh, I see you were a ballet dancer." He makes the joke. I was too. He wasn't a ballet. And you can even tell, like, he's a little bit portly. Um, but instead of just taking the olive branch and his kindness in that moment, what I decided to do was insult him in one word, in one outrageous blurt. It's a very efficient insult. I thought I had lost the job. So what I did was I don't know why I did this again, nervous tick. I looked him up and down, cocked my head, and said clearly in a super sassy, sarcastic tone. And I was like, oh my God, what have I done? I just insulted the very person that was trying to be nice to me, who I need to impress. There goes my job. So I got through it. I walked away at the end, tail between my legs. That was horrible. And I definitely lost sleep over it. But then a few days later, my phone rang, and it was Harvard. It was Harvard Business School. It was where I was interviewed. I had interviewed for. It was that school where I made the sassily sarcastic mean joke like a mean girl. And they hired me. And now I know that it is not in spite of what I said. It's actually partly because of it, because the guy I insulted, he loves to say it. It's part of his lore now. Whenever there's new, so he became a close mentor of mine. Whenever there's new professors we're interviewing, he loves telling our origin stories. And he says, when Leslie insulted me like that, we thought, she's got confidence. She's got sass. She can handle what it takes to teach in our teaching situation here, which often has very challenging students. So, and then later I discovered that actually on how, when in job interviews, when candidates are a little more real, like instead of the usual what's your weakest thing, if instead of saying, oh, I work too hard, giving something real, like, but in the right way, like saying, well, um you know I'm working on my organizational skills, and I've come up with some really good systems to help, and they're really helping. In fact, I'm happy to teach colleagues how to do them, right? Like you can control the way you say the thing. Um, and so studies have suggested when candidates actually are real, they are more likely to get the jobs that they're actually qualified for. So that's uplifting. Um, okay. Now, the upside of an overshare is often delayed, as I said. The upside in my case, the sting was immediate. Oh my God, what did I do? But then a few days later, I got the phone call, and then a lifelong mentor. But that's if we even experience the upside in the first place, because what we do, because we're so afraid of the sting of an overshare of TMI, we're so oversensitive to it, it causes us to self-censor, right? We don't share. And that leads me to wonder about missed opportunities. A lot of the issues of undersharing come in the form of missed opportunities, romances that never blossom, friendships that never spark, colleagues that never quite trust you. And so those aren't super salient, the missed opportunities, because we don't experience them as vividly as the sting of a TMI. So let me just walk you through what I mean by this and how undersharing could lead to a missed opportunity. Okay. So here's Nerdly Leslie again, same conference. And in between the interviews, all of the candidates, we are all on the elevators moving around, going to the next spot. So I get on the elevator. It's a lot. It's exciting, but it's a lot. I'm introverted. It's like 8 hours of the day of going around and selling yourself, talking to people, being asked difficult questions. I get into the elevator. There's one person in it, clearly a job candidate, because we're both wearing our adorably ill-fitting new black suits. In fact, fun fact, years later, I found my little blazer, my little Banana Republic blazer that I'd bought for the job interview. And I noticed that the double vent, the stitching at the back on the double vent was still stitched. So sweet. I love it. So at any rate, I get in wearing this brand new Banana Republic ill-fitting suit, and no offense, Banana Republic, but I get in and I just let out a whole body, like I'm so exhausted. I just was real. I knew it was safe to be real because we're literally in a metal box with another candidate and we're not competing. I mean, not really. There's so many candidates and a lot of jobs. And okay. And what does what does the guy say? He says, straightens right up and he says, "Oh, I'm so energized. This is such an amazing opportunity to meet all these amazing new professors and share my work." And I just he just went straight into the song and dance. And I thought, can't we just be real? Like we're literally in a metal vault. Can't you just be real with me for once? Um, and I've often reflected back on that because the guy, he's a very esteemed scholar. He's very successful. And when I've seen him over the years at conferences, I've never really felt the urge to chat him up. And I've always wondered whether it was kind of, I think it's partly that sting of the reciprocity fail that I kind of was like vulnerable there and invited him to also be vulnerable. And then he just kind of shot me down by straightening right up. And, I thought, well, what if instead he said, "Oh, yeah, I'm tired too." And you know what? I was just in this interview. You won't believe what they said, right? Like something that's bonding. Maybe we would have been lifelong friends. Maybe we would have collaborated. I don't know. But that's an example of like how a missed opportunity, you never know it. But I'm trying to make it more visceral so that we see these things. Okay. Now, how might we make better disclosure decisions? Well, step one is awareness. Step two is even handed consideration, right? By that, I mean, we want to think about the downsides of revealing come to us immediately. We want to think about the benefits of revealing as well. That doesn't come so naturally. But also, crucially, we want to think of the downsides of concealing, which we often neglect, and also the benefits of concealing, because there might be some, right? And as I walked you through that example that we can all relate to of like, when someone doesn't credit you for your idea, you're immediately like, oh, I don't want to have an awkward conversation. I'll be seen as petty. They're going to hate me. That's valid. But don't stop there. Be like, well, if I don't say the thing, I'm going to ruminate. That's bad too. And then you might start to see the bona fide benefits of revealing that, like, oh, if I say it in the right way, they may trust me more and respect me more. We may become even closer, and so on. Okay. Now, so far, basically what I've shown you is that revealing makes people trust you, which amazingness. Puppy flower, puppies and rainbows and everything is amazing. Of course, there are real risks. I don't have all the time to talk about the horror stories of TMI, but I don't think I need to because we all know those. We don't talk enough about the problem of TLI, of too little information, right? The missed opportunities. So, what are some other, aside from amazingness, what are some other metrics? So, I've been talking kind of about relational fuzzy ones. Fuzzy, that sounds demeaning to psychologists, but it's not fuzzy. Fuzzy feelings are such strong data. At any rate, I digress. Okay, but I'm a Harvard Business School professor, so I do have to talk about something that's definitely not fuzzy, sales. How do we make money off of this? So, yes, that sounds crass, but it's true that we've done research with companies on how when companies reveal more, when companies are more forthcoming, it can make their customers trust them more and it can increase sales. Yeah, sounds bananas, but let me just show you a little bit of data on that. We did a study, my colleague Ryan Buell and I, with an e-tailer, and the e-tailer happened to be selling wallets. And what we did was we changed up the price tag. So this is the standard, right? It says 115 bucks for the wallet, but in other versions, other customers, we randomized them to see the normal price tag or a cost transparent version where we tell them this is what it costs us to make. Now this is the equivalent, the firm equivalent of a sensitive self-disclosure, right? Because information on gross margins, anything relevant to that is typically kept under the vest, right? This is unusual. And the same thing, just as when I tell you what kind of my big fears and regrets are, you trust me more. When firms tell us their secret, I'm pointing to my monitor, tell us their secrets like, there's a pretty decent gross margin on this that they're making when they tell you the costs. Um, you might think that, ooh, it reminds customers how much that they're making money off of us. That's what I thought going into it. But in fact, it makes them trust you more. And this increased sales by 12%. That is a giant effect. Now, my claim isn't that you share anything sensitive and you'll always get benefits. Not at all. There's many things that firms it would not be in their advantage to reveal. For example, trade secrets. And certainly this isn't always going to get you a 12% boost. The point is, it's an existence proof that doing something that's not intuitive to most of us, to us as humans, to us as firms, revealing something a little sensitive, it can actually reap rewards by trust and in turn here increased buying. This is another version, um, which there we got a 22% increase. But what I wanted to show you is this is probably my favorite experiment I've ever done because it has like kind of the feel of a high school science fair project, but also has depth to it. So this was done at um, at Spangler Hall on the Harvard Business School campus with my colleague again, Ryan Buell. And what we did was we varied how transparent the signs were on the vat of chicken noodle soup in the cafeteria. Okay. Cafeteria, I know it's super, super nice cafeteria. We are very spoiled. And on the vat of chicken noodle soup, we had this giant sign sometimes that would just say, these are the ingredients and this is the price. The treatment, so the other version of this was transparent. It was revealing. It was revealing the cost to make everything, the cost of all the ingredients. So that's the only difference is here it's being more revelatory, right? It's revealing something kind of secretive that you would think is secretive. And what Ryan and I did, dressed in plain clothes, every half hour, on the half hour, we'd switch the signs. Um, and then we had a great relationship with the staff there. They gave us the sales data. So we could tell, we could link it up as a function of whether it was the transparent sign or the control sign. Did we sell more chicken noodle soup? And we did. We sold 21% more chicken noodle soup when we were transparent. And many, many studies further show that it truly is because the customer trusts you more, trusts the product more, it trusts you more, and likes you more and wants to buy it more. So that again was a revelation. Finally, before we take Q&A, which I'm dying to hear your questions, this was study surprised me even more. This was like a hardcore business, like fine, like the biggest bank in Australia, right? There may be Australians on this call. Hello, hello. You'll know CommBank. Okay, huge bank in Australia. Well, what CommBank did was CommBank, with the help of my colleague, they did an experiment where they tested whether in their credit cards, if they were a little bit more open about the credit card downsides, might it make customers more likely to sign on to the credit cards, for example, which is kind of a counterintuitive idea, right? Because usually when we're buying credit cards, when we're on the site, not buying it, when we're signing up for credit cards, the company's standard marketing practice, they tell us, oh, all the points, or it's a low fee, or it's a great interest rate, whatever the benefit is, they're selling it, right? That's like marketing 101. But what CommBank decided to do was, in addition to that, let's also tell them what the salient negatives are for each card, right? So, for example, this is kind of the standard web page for credit cards. If you wanted to get a credit card or a CommBank, this is what it looks like. And they randomize people to either see this or here, see that? I'm highlighting it for you. Keep in mind, there's an annual fee. So they're making it salient that there's an annual fee. The bad stuff, salient. Sometimes it was even more salient on this page. They added a whole thing, trade-offs. We thought a lot about the word there. We wanted like downsides, but trade-offs was good enough. Look at the purchase interest rate. It's higher than other cards. It doesn't have travel insurance. Like, don't get this card. It's kind of like that's what they're saying. So it's very odd, right? Why would a company do this? Right? Whoa, they added a whole new menu saying the bad stuff. Why would a company do this? And what happened? So we were interested in, of course, two hugely important things with the business acquisition funnel, as in, did this attract people? Did it scare them off? And retention. How long did we keep the customers as a function of whether they landed on the standard or the site that said, don't buy this. This said that had the downsides. Okay, so here we have the whole funnel. This is like mwah, chef's kiss, beautiful data, right? The whole funnel. The application starts, soft submission, you press submit, and then you need to verify, and then did they open the account? Did they activate it? Did they use it? Okay, so they tracked them all the way through. You know, I love data makes me melt. That's my love language. Check this out. Those are completely overlapping bars. That's great news. We didn't scare people away. That was the major concern is that if you're upfront about these things, they're just going to go away to a competitor. It didn't scare people away. There was no effect. What about retention? This is amazing. They are 20.5% less likely to cancel their cards after 9 months. That is so like it's a 1.5 about percentage point. That is a giant effect. The experiment alone made a lot of money. But they had to take a risk, of course. And the reason why you can now think about it's kind of like always when we have the results, we're like, oh, that makes sense. Our brains are really good at sense making in hindsight. The idea is that when there may be a global trust thing that, people that reveal, firms that reveal, we trust them more, they come across as honest. But also here, the information helps people choose the cards that fit them better. So it improves the consumer product fit. And if you can do it in a way that doesn't scare people away, I think a huge part is that they had a good product mix. So there was something for everyone. People matched to cards that fit them better. And as a result, they stayed longer. Okay. Now I really sound like a B school prof. Okay. back to LJ. But you can see that revealing breeds trust, breeds sales. We have found so many other effects in so many other studies, liking, respect, perceived competence, motivation, and so on, and more to be discovered. So I want to leave you just with this that our intuition, this is our intuition, but the reality is more complex and more rich with opportunities of the benefits of being just a little bit more open a lot of the time. Oh, and finally, of course, here's my book. I would love for you to order it. You can order it on my website or on Amazon or anywhere you buy books. Also, if you go to my website, there's some fun quizzes where you can learn about like your personality. Sometimes people ask me, do I have a revealing personality? What does that even mean? So, as I said, BuzzFeed quizzes are my kryptonite. So my gift to you in the world is I've created quizzes for you to take as well. Okay, amazing. So I think we've got good time for some questions, right?
Absolutely. Thank you so
Awesome.
much, Leslie. This is absolutely wonderful. We have a ton of questions coming in the chat and
Yay,
really,
yay.
really appreciate that. Um, I will say that there's a first bundle of questions that are all about where you
Hmm.
draw the line between what's
Yes.
good revealing and what's an overshare. Like, how do
Yep.
you place that cursor?
Yep.
Because as you showed, reality is sometimes quite different
Yep.
from what we fear.
Yes. So I would say, first of all, like real talk here, the line is always moving. It's not like you're always going to know where the line is. Um, I think that the more I've studied this and really practiced it, I do think of revealing it's a practice. The more I have come to believe that errors crossing that line, errors of oversharing, they're most often an error, like a failure to read the room. Because when you think about it, like almost anything can be appropriate to share depending on the right person in the right context. So, what does that mean for making better decisions? It means first, understand like kind of what your goal is. And second, given that goal, is the person you're thinking of confiding to the right person? Is this the right situation? So let me just give you an example. So when I was pregnant with our first child, I I blurted out, like I sent my landlord, like it was super early, and you're not required to tell your landlord this. And I said to you can see where this is going. I sent this email to my landlord in a spirit of like warmth and transparency and naivete. I said, yeah, we're pregnant and we're excited. And then literally the next day she said, I'm selling the house. And that triggered a whole series of things that caused us to move. It all worked out in the end, but the core thing, like I revealed some. I have my ideas for why that happened, but my point is that if I had thought to myself before I blurted that out, if I thought, what is my goal here? And knowing your goal requires being a good revealer requires heightened self-awareness, right? You got to really be brutally honest with yourself. I thought it was because I'm really happy and excited and I feel lonely because it's COVID and I can't like my parents, my family, that we're not around. I feel isolated. I just need to tell someone. And and if I realized that I just wanted like warmth and attention, like the landlord is the last person. Like they're like my friends. I like as soon as I was pregnant, I had sent my friends the pee stick on a that's maybe TMI on a text message. So I could have just called them up and been like, I'm so excited, let's talk about it. So that's something that can really help you to read the room is really knowing what your intention is.
Yeah, yeah, great. Thank you. In somewhat of that same vein, a number of folks, and this is obviously we always have a very international crowd here,
Yeah.
asking about how you can make that diagnosis in and sensitivity to different cultures that may
Yeah.
be more receptive. And I would say culture could be international. It could also be like
Yep.
workplace versus,
Yep.
your best friends.
Totally,
So
totally.
how do you think about that when you enter into the cost benefit analysis of sharing some
Yes.
information?
Yes. So, see chapter 4, where I discuss culture. But it's funny because when I was looking for a publisher for my book, um, my literary agent, they try to get publishers all around the world. And in Japan, my agent sent the book proposal out to, I think it was like 19 different publishers, and one and only one bought it. Thank you, Kanki Publishing. Thank you. um, but what I learned from that, because we were able to get some intel on why they weren't interested, is that they said the Japanese culture is just much more reserved. And there's a sense that, like, sharing, oversharing, it's very individualistic, it's very brash, and it's kind of immature. And that was such a beautiful learning for me because I think at the time, the way I had been formulating the ideas for the book was like an exact 180 from the like privacy and now like total openness. And that's not quite right either, right? Because we can't, the title of the book is The Underrated Power of Oversharing, but you'll quickly realize in the book that that's like a glib title. It's like we're not, there is such a thing as oversharing, but it's like a cheeky title that what you think is oversharing is often just sharing. But so it was interesting. So that made me really interested then in one, it told me I need to have the nuance of this, which made for a richer book. But secondly, it made me fascinated by cultural differences. And what we know from the research that's out there is that it's true that collectivist countries, cultures such as that in Japan, they they have a more of a negative view of like the very individualistic self-disclosure of like revealing things about yourself. That being said, the phenomena I talk about in the book, the phenomena that like when you reveal, it causes people to trust you, like those basic human truths, those are universal. The difference is in these individualistic cultures, in these collectivist cultures in particular, you need to be even more cognizant of reading the room of context because there's like there are very strong norms about when you can reveal and not, and so you have to you just can't leave your situational awareness at home when you're in these other cultures.
Yeah, lovely. Um, we have a question, of course, about negotiation, which I appreciate.
Yes,
We can't be
I
in
mean,
talking
I
about this
teach
book.
negotiation.
It's
It's
a program
deeply
on
relevant.
negotiation.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So thank you, Beth, who is saying that,
Great.
sometimes in commercial negotiations,
Hmm.
you have a duty to not
Yeah.
overshare certain information, right? It's not just
Yes.
up to you. Could, in that situation, a personal share help to build trust
Yes. Love it.
in a way that doesn't violate, your sort of fiduciary duty to the organization that you're representing?
Totally. In fact, maybe we should hire her as an instructor,
She
because
sounds great.
that's exactly right. I mean, that's what I teach. Tomorrow I'll be teaching negotiation to a bunch of executives at the business school, and um, it does not have to be like revealing establishes such rapport, and it's harder to be a jerk in a negotiation if you have rapport with the person. So you really want to try to make that happen, and we know revealing increases rapport. So it feels like small talk is like not doing anything, but if you do it the right way where you're like kind of sharing some stuff, not super deep, but more than what's the weather, we can do better than that. That creates some relational benefits. You do not have to reveal, you should not reveal something that's really critical information to the negotiation. That being said, what I do find again and again in negotiation is most of the world, maybe not attendees here because we're part of PON, but a lot of the world has this view of negotiation as zero sum, as it's going to be a fight. And we know that sometimes negotiations really are zero sum, but we also know that most times they're not. And even ones that present as zero sum need not be that case. And so, how do you create value in a negotiation? How do you move from a zero sum distributive negotiation, as they're called, to an integrative negotiation, one where it's win win, the possibility where both you can expand the pie, so to speak? That's a heck of a lot of negotiation jargon in like 30 seconds, but we all know because you're all PON people. But in order to do that, we need to share. we need to open up, right? So this, when my executives, I got a whole new batch of them tomorrow. They're going to come in and they're going to be like, don't say anything. And what hopefully they will learn is that by sharing some things, that's the key to doing well. Not everything, but what is the kind of information? Then they're going to ask me this. What is the kind, and I'm going to ask them, see if they get it. But anyways, they're going to ask me, what is the kind of information that's safe to share? And what you want to share is you want to share your interests, what you value. You're not going to say the dollars, you're not going to say your reservation value, you're not going to say the minimum amount you value it or anything like that, but you're going to say qualitatively, rank order, I value this more than this. Like if you're with a contractor, I value speed more than pricing. I care about pricing, but speed, right? So that's what you want to share and that's what you want to elicit from your counterpart.
Yeah, lovely. Um, you provide some examples, you've mentioned some today and also in the book about, moments where it's dangerous to share and
Yeah.
there can be, especially
Yeah.
in the workplace,
Yeah.
times you
Yeah.
mentioned, somebody who, might have a disability, when do you want to bring that up? I guess to summarize the vein of questions around here, when, does our response to conceal, which for many people is really true, is that,
Hmm.
uh, you know, sometimes one that should be heeded? Does it come from negative experiences? How should we think
Yeah.
about overcoming it? Because I don't think it's all
Yeah.
bad, and you
I
certainly don't say
agree.
so.
I agree. I agree. Yeah. I think basically, well, overarching thing, revealing is a skill. And to do it better, to become better calibrated to the risks and rewards, we need to do it. So you need to try, you need to say the thing sometimes. One thing I like to say is that if you never feel the sting of TMI, then you've never gone far enough. It's like, to put it into negotiation terms, Linda Babcock, oh, goddess. Linda Babcock, love her, economist at Carnegie Mellon, where I got my PhD. She she said to me, Leslie, if you always get what you want, you're not asking for enough. Right. So if you, similarly with disclosure, if you never feel like it's TMI, you're leaving a lot of goodness on the table. You're not going far enough. But yet we truly can overshare sometimes. And so how do you, is the question, like, what are the situation when it's really dangerous? Like, should you listen to yourself? Well, by practicing and self-reflecting, you're going to become less oversensitive to the risks of revealing. So that'll balance you out more, such that you'll be more able to trust your gut. So don't ignore your gut. I think, especially in riskier situations, a riskier situation might be a workplace context, especially when you have are in a low status role. That's where it's riskier to reveal. And I think in that case, my guidance would be like all the things I've already said. What's your purpose? Think about the costs and benefits, but also follow your gut. If your gut, if it just doesn't feel right, you should not reveal, because revealing, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. You can always decide the next day to like do a different approach, talk to someone else, but once it's out, you can't unsay it. So that's really important, especially when you think about things like invisible disability, requesting accommodations. Like, you got to be really, really careful with that.
Mhm. Wonderful. All right, I'm going to make this the last question, and it is a
Okay.
really beautiful one. So thank you, Aram, for sharing your story. This person had early stage cancer, but is doing very
Yeah.
well now, and
Good.
has, at times had to explain both a gap in a career and,
Yeah.
how that
Yeah.
figures on a
Yeah.
CV. And also mentions that,
Yeah.
later had to explain this to romantic partners, and
Mm.
when to disclose and not. And this person's point is that basically both of those things have gone pretty well, but the real
Mm.
problem is themselves after the
Oh.
disclosure feeling very vulnerable and
Oh.
wants to know, sometimes after giving this kind of disclosure, I find
Yeah.
myself crying and dealing with feelings like fear or emotional exposure. So how do you manage
Oh,
or
geez.
overcome
Yeah.
these feelings? Because actually
Yeah.
the disclosure itself went super well. So first
Yeah.
of all, thank you,
Yeah.
for sharing your story, and we're so glad you're doing
Yeah.
well. I look forward to Leslie's
Yes.
answer.
Thank you. And two quick responses because we're at time. One is, if you feel very close with these people, the people that you're sharing these things, you can. I found this really helpful. You can ask them. You could say, like, if they're close enough to be honest, what impact did that have on you? How did you feel? Because you will find that, like, at least for me, the source of my ruminations is like way off base with how I was actually perceived. Like we're too hard on ourselves. So like the more you can get data and educate yourself, that's good. The second is oftentimes this is not intuitive. The answer to the disclosure hangover is not to curl up and reveal less, but to actually reveal more to the right people in the right way. So here, what I mean is, you could, for example, there's tons of really and fascinating work on how writing, revealing even to ourselves the things that are bothering us is deeply therapeutic. So if you take what's swirling around in your head and you write a diary, that has been shown in many, many actual randomized trials to like decrease your blood pressure, to increase your emotional well-being. And it's because it seems silly, right? If it's in my brain or private on paper, what's the difference? It's because when you take what's in your brain and you put words on it, it activates the more logical part, the prefrontal cortex part of your brain. So you like become more rational about it. It gives you perspective, which in turn helps you deal with it better. But
Wonderful.
it's
Thank
hard. I
you.
mean, I just said that super fast.
It is, but I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And we are at time. So just to
Yeah.
quickly conclude, Leslie John, thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
spending time with us for this wonderful book. We've
Yay.
got the link in the chat. If you had to join late, the recording of this event will be up on our website in just a few days. I will also invite you to go there to see all of the upcoming events that we have coming up, both in person and live events. We have a whole slate of May things. I guess we're taking a couple weeks off in April. That wasn't sort of deliberate, but it is a good spring break time for our next couple of PON lives. So we look forward to seeing you either in person in Cambridge or online for our next events. Thank you so much, Leslie John, and to everyone for joining us today. We hope that you have a great rest of your day. Be well. Thanks.